Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
I'm Dion Mitchell here with my co-host Mehul Anjaria. On this episode of Crime Redefined, we are very excited to present yet another book author interview. Michael McAuliffe is the author of No Truth Left to Tell, a fictional legal thriller that was released earlier this year. It centers around an investigation into the Ku Klux Klan in the early 90s.
This is Michael McAuliffe's first novel. He has had an impressive legal career spanning 30 years. Among his accomplishments, in 2008, he was elected as the state attorney for Palm Beach County, and he previously served as a federal prosecutor in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. On top of that, he's been a partner at a major law firm and general counsel for a global company, as well as an adjunct law professor.
Based on this book, Michael seems to have successfully made the pivot from attorney to author and brings a ton of credibility and true insider knowledge to the story he tells.
Absolutely. This novel can be seen through a number of lenses: as a true legal thriller, as a clever demonstration of some of the toughest legal issues out there, and finally, as an exploration of the progress or lack thereof in race relations in the South.
So with that, Mehul, are you ready to dig in with our interview with Michael and hear about what went into the creation of this riveting story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Michael, thanks so much for joining us on Crime Redefined today.
My pleasure.
First, I'd like to say how much I enjoyed your book.
Oh, well, thank you.
So let's go ahead and jump into this. And I'm going to have you tell us about the real Ku Klux Klan case you prosecuted in Louisiana and how much similarity there is with the case featured in your book.
Well, that should remain somewhat a mystery. It's a fictional book, so it is a novel. Although, as I tell people, it's loosely based on some cases that I handled as a young federal civil rights prosecutor in, as it turns out, the early 1990s in Louisiana. So I did team up with a set of FBI agents and a local assistant U.S. attorney to investigate the head of the Ku Klux Klan in Louisiana, and I think 14 of his followers on hate crime charges. They did burn a series of crosses targeting victims, the minority community in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Well, that's so you're saying this is kind of a kind of a mashup of some different cases. It's funny because it didn't come across that way in the book at all.
Oh, good. And as you know, having read the book, it intersects with another storyline later as the plot accelerates, and then that police corruption matter is loosely based on an investigation that I did. In not in Louisiana, really in Indiana many years ago.
Was that also a kind of a mashup, or was that a singular case? The corruption case.
Yeah, the corruption case. It was of a rogue narcotics unit. It did involve some of the scenes that are depicted. There are elements of reality in many of the events, and as there are character traits that are lifted from people that I either know or knew or crossed paths with when I was doing these cases. So it's a bit of a mashup, as you say.
So 2 quick follow-up questions. Did you notify any of the people that you were kind of taking some of their traits that they were going to be flavored in the book?
No, I didn't. I didn't think it was putting on my lawyer hat now. I didn't think it was necessary to let them know that it was based on one particular trait or one factual incident. So none of the folks are close enough to the characters, or the characters aren't close enough to any particular person that I thought I needed permission. I did send advanced reader copies to some folks.
Were they able to identify themselves in the character write-ups?
Yeah, that was their challenge. Some it was pretty easy. Others, I think, are still scratching their heads.
So that leads me to this question: does that mean you did or didn't actually date the granddaughter?
I did not.
Okay, we had a bet on that.
Well, Michael, I understand that you're interested in actually using the novel as the basis for a law school class, which I think is an excellent idea given the ethical dilemmas and issues that it raises. How's that project coming along, and what exactly would that class look like?
I'm happy to report as of this week, the law school at the College of William & Mary, where I actually attended and am an adjunct professor, approved a course offering for the fall. So it's a short course, so it's a week or 2 weeks long, and the syllabus has the novel as the primary reading material, and then you lift out legal themes or issues from the novel itself, and then in a law school academic setting, talk about them and delve into them a little more. So, the book is a bit of a hybrid. I think for folks who are learning the law or are lawyers or have some connection to the law, it might serve one purpose. And then for a more general readership, hopefully it's as attractive for slightly, maybe overlapping, but slightly different reasons.
I was wondering, is it really the case that the Justice Department doesn't require civil rights attorneys to complete any specialized training before receiving their credentials? And if so, how can that be?
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. As odd as it seems, when you become a lot of different occupations or positions, you train up and learn the substance of what you're doing. At the Justice Department, I think it's still the case, I believe it is, you get assigned into particular sections or divisions within the Justice Department, but you don't necessarily have to come with any expertise or knowledge of the substance of the type of case that you're doing. Like, for example, a tax fraud case or a criminal civil rights case, right, or a public corruption case. And in the criminal section, it was learning by doing.
I was wondering, did you, on your own, do any additional training? Specialized training?
Well, I think most of us do. When you get assigned a police misconduct investigation, the first thing you do is you walk down the hall to an older, more experienced prosecutor who may have done dozens of them, investigations and prosecutions, all difficult really in that arena. And you pick their brain. You also, to be fair, young section lawyers in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division are paired with a more experienced attorney. So they don't literally shove you out there onto the playing field with by yourself with no protection or padding.
Well, Michael, I've heard you say that the protagonist, Adrian Rush, will be taking on human traffickers in his next adventure. When might that book be out, and how much has Adrian evolved since his KKK case?
Well, Adrian was brand spanking new in No Truth Left to Tell and had a lot to learn. And I think through the story, he does grow up professionally and personally, and is now turning his attention to trying to tackle the scourge of human trafficking, which is part of the criminal section's enforcement responsibilities. And so he's a more mature civil rights warrior, but the stakes are going to get even higher for him. So I hope readers will see more of Adrian Rush soon enough. A year or 2 years. I'm not quite sure how long the story will take to be polished and finished, but that's the goal.
Well, you've got two fans here. We're both looking forward to that. I've got a question for you, though. Is the missing toe story real, and how much of you is in Adrian Rush?
Well, those two questions are inexorably linked, aren't they?
Yes.
I think that, there is a lot of Adrian Rush in Michael, or Michael in Adrian, although he is a fictional character and protagonist. I do have all my digits, and
That's good
but
to hear.
I am a climber, and some of the lessons that I think that I take from alpine mountaineering, I wanted to infuse the story with. It is a particular quirk of mine that I think got grafted onto Adrian. So we all leave a little bit on the mountain, so to speak, in our lives, and that was just part of the metaphor for his journey.
Well, Michael, one of my favorite quotes in the novel comes from the judge after a particularly gut-wrenching ruling is made. And she tells Adrian Rush, quote, "Sometimes the best defender of a defendant's civil liberties is an ethical prosecutor." And thinking about that, one way that has manifested itself is with some of the newer conviction integrity units that prosecutors have voluntarily formed to look over questionable convictions. But Michael, my question for you is, in your opinion, what percentage of prosecutors today really embody that quote from the judge?
It's a wonderful issue, one that's needed to be talked about more than it is, quite frankly. And part of the reason I wrote the book was I truly believe what the judge in the book says. And that's not to diminish or marginalize zealous advocacy by defense attorneys who are responsible for pursuing the interests and advocating on behalf of individuals. We have an adversarial system for a reason, and I completely believe in it. I do think the first line of defense for civil rights and constitutional rights is the ethical prosecutor. It's tough to live up to the ideals. And part of the book is about Adrian Rush's struggle to know what the right thing is to do. At one point he's willing not to do what I think is his clear ethical responsibility, but his moral sense of right and wrong clashes with it. It's meant to be a close call on a personal level, even though it's not a close call in the legal world. As far as the percentage of prosecutors who reach that ideal, unfortunately, it's not high enough. Prosecutors in the American system wield such power in terms of directing the resources of government against individuals and groups, and unfortunately, I'm a defense attorney now, but prosecutors trip and fall. I do think the system is designed to try to ferret those mistakes out. But as you can see, we have a history of inequality and bias in our criminal justice system, and it plays out every day in lots of ways.
You just mentioned your work on the side of the defense now. In your current law practice, what type of cases do you primarily take on?
I do federal white-collar defense work now, selected cases. A lot of the matters are pre-charge or pre-indictment. So my knowledge of the federal criminal justice system and sometimes my relationships and hopefully my credibility with decision makers can be brought to bear in an appropriate way. My job is often to try to talk folks out of charging my clients. And so that's really what I do professionally, aside from writing and teaching, which is, one really is maybe enabling the other.
Well, this novel is really a demonstration of how justice must be blind, no matter how difficult or ugly it is. And there's a particular episode in the book that Dion and I kind of chuckle a little bit about, and it's where the detective uses, shall we say, some very creative and actually funny means of extracting a confession using a Polaroid camera. Now, I work criminal defense. I work on post-conviction cases, but I have to admit, Michael, I found myself actually rooting for the corrupt cop. Now, I very quickly started feeling ashamed of myself, but this novel causes a lot of introspection in that regard. And, legally, it seems like a coerced true confession versus a coerced false confession are really indistinguishably bad. But Michael, and this kind of goes back to my previous question, how much do you think attorneys struggle to quickly reach that conclusion that both types of coerced confessions are equally bad? And, how much of a struggle is it for them to do the right thing like Adrian did when you consider all of the factors in a case, whether it's undue pressure or not?
I think it is a struggle in real life. I hope the story depicts a little bit of that. The detective Batiste is in the real world. He's on the streets. He's dealing with folks who do bad things and hurt others all the time. And the reality is that you get close to the line in trying to do what you might think is the right thing to do. But, in our system, it's all about process. And it's a tough principle to accept and live by all the time, because bad things can happen when you make the right ethical decision. And I think my book hopefully has that as part of the insights and the storytelling.
Michael, if you don't mind sharing, as your time as a prosecutor, were you ever faced with death threats or extortion?
Sure. Yes. I mean, I don't think it's so unusual. When I was the state attorney in Palm Beach County, the elected state attorney, I would get threats. Even I think at one point someone mailed white powdery substance and said he was going to kill me. And he actually threatened to kill me for a case I wasn't even the elected state attorney while he was being prosecuted. So it was like insult to injury. As a federal civil rights prosecutor, I've been threatened by neo-Nazis and members of the white Aryan resistance. But that just comes with the job and those enforcement responsibilities. I never have had an occasion to have protection or a threat that was particularly specific enough that we all thought that there was some risk of it being carried out.
Well, Michael, another one of the issues raised in the novel is the complications that inevitably arise when federal law enforcement has to investigate local law enforcement. In your experience, what are some of those difficulties in that sort of investigation? Permanent
tension, I think, attaches to those relationships. In one way, your state and local partnerships, and there are a lot of task forces, narcotics, organized crime, corruption, these multi-jurisdictional and multi-agency task forces that exist all across the country. And yet each of these enforcement agencies roll up to their own leader, and they have their own jurisdictions, their own, in many cases, personalities. So I've seen it from both the federal perspective as a federal prosecutor, as an assistant U.S. attorney. I've seen it as a federal civil rights prosecutor, and I've seen that tension as the elected state attorney, which is the equivalent of a district attorney. So it's a permanent fixture of our law enforcement lives and landscape.
Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here and get a little bit lighter. Michael, how would you compare and contrast writing a novel with the legal writing that you do in your everyday law practice?
Well, I learned the answer to that question the hard way. The novel, obviously the novel that one reads is not the novel, is not the story, and it's not the manuscript that you start off with. If anyone believes otherwise, I want to disabuse them of that notion. At least that's true for me. So it's probably 25 iterations later with a lot of editing and development and changes that go along it. My first few versions of the manuscript, I think, were probably good lawyerly writing, but left something to be desired as creative fiction writing. And that's a risk of writing not only about what you know, but what you, roughly that you've done. And I made the mistake early on of trying to adhere too closely to the shoreline of reality. And I didn't give myself as an author or writer permission to invent my world and to fully develop characters in my head before putting them on the page. So I really went through a struggle and a process to give myself permission to write a novel instead of an awkward, middling memoir.
That actually makes for a great segue. How was writing on Martha's Vineyard inspirational to you?
Well, it is a writer's mecca, and so it's a very humbling place to be an aspiring novelist. Your friends and neighbors, you can look around and almost point famous, successful writers and poets out walking along, at the farmer's market in West Tisbury or on the Chilmark General Store porch. So it's both inspirational and sometimes more than humbling. It sometimes made me feel very inadequate as a debut novelist. But in general, it's a magical place. So on balance, it's good to be able to be there and to write.
In the novel, Michael, one of the characters, Nettie, she had a Takotsubo heart attack. Now, I happen to be familiar with that because a close family member of mine had one recently, but that's a pretty obscure cardiac incident. Michael, how exactly did that get on your writing radar?
Well, I wanted to have Nettie be injured and have her have a price, a burden of being targeted by the Klan. And so not only is her home targeted, but she is targeted. And in talking with a close friend of mine who's a cardiologist, somehow the discussion led to that. And I thought, oh, perfect. That's a nice way of sharing with the reader what's happening or what the harm was to Nettie Wynn. And so I think it works.
Do you see your novel making it to the big screen someday?
Well, every author secretly has an ambition that there's a story there that's cinematic and dramatic and is suitable for adaptation to some screen, small or big. Of course, I have that wish, but I have no idea whether it's realistic or not. I do think that several reviews have noted that the writing, that I wrote the novel in a way that is cinematic, that the arc of the story. And I think that that's probably true. I'm not sure how purposeful it was, but my writing style happens to be fairly clean, I think. You can take that either as a compliment or not. I think some people view it differently. And so I think that the story would make for a good movie or TV. Who knows? So
no, I actually agree with that statement. I think while reading it, you can actually, I can envision seeing this play out on the big screen. I'm not just saying that. Actually, I could really see that being on the big screen someday, or even one of the streamers.
Good. You know better than me.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it played well. I can definitely see it. How about any more climbing expeditions?
Well, I was just recently in Patagonia with my middle child, my daughter, who was studying in Argentina. So we did a nice set of trekking and hikes in Patagonia. I do need to pick a mountain, a climb, but I had been preoccupied with the book. So I do need to think of a good one. Any suggestions would be welcome.
I'll have to give that some thought. I noticed that in your I think your bio, you mentioned you spent some time in the Cascades, and I've actually hit a number of peaks up there myself. But I'll have to give that some thought.
Good. Yeah, I climbed a little bit in the Cascades, more lower in the Colorado Rockies, and then I recently spent some time in the Himalayas, and and spent a month in Kathmandu. So I'm open to new and different terrains.
Well, Michael, this was a wonderful discussion, and it was really a delight both to read your book and talk to you today. And, this novel really challenges justice practitioners to see all sides of the equation, and I just can't recommend it enough.
Well, thank you. That's high praise. I very much appreciate it.
We want to wish you good luck with your future projects, and let us know when your next book is out so we can invite you back.
I will stay in touch.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
First of all, Mehul, is it just me, or does Michael make you feel like you haven't done anything with your life?
Yeah, Dion, it's not just you. I'm feeling like a bit of a loser right now. But give me your overall take on the book after reading it.
Mehul, my main takeaway is this. I thought that No Truth Left to Tell is for everyone, meaning you don't need to be a legal scholar to read it. I really thought that Michael did an excellent job of addressing complicated legal issues in an understandable and entertaining manner.
To that end, I think that any law student studying criminal law should read this book. I mean, there are situations, considerations, and dilemmas in this book that you just can't learn about how to handle in law school. And my other takeaway was that in a typical wrongful conviction case, you look back at it and the defense attorney was either ineffective and or the forensic science was questionable. Now here, there was some arson evidence, but it was pretty much understood by the prosecution that it was not of any use. So there wasn't a problem there. And I thought in trial, the defense attorney actually did a very good job in his cross-examination. He was constantly probing about the suspect's circumstances around the confessions. And given the overall situation in the story, there really wasn't a whole lot more he could have done.
We hope you enjoyed our time with Michael, and we encourage our listeners to read his book. To learn more about Michael and the novel, and for links to purchase it, please check out notruthlefttotell.com. We really appreciate all of our listeners and social media followers, and thank you so much for the thousands of downloads. Check out the Crime Redefined page at crimeredefined.libsyn.com. Please interact with us on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.